Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. This is Mark McCaffrey. I'm the founder of ECOS, and we're very excited today to be talking about and sort of launching the ECOS Design Charrette process. And for those of you who are not muting your microphone, if you could do so now so we can avoid the feedback. I will actually go ahead and turn this over to Eileen, who will be introducing some of our presenters today. And the goal of our conversation today is to discuss some of the background about what ECOS is and the Design Charrette process as it's evolved to this point, and look at the dates and some of the sort of housekeeping issues around that. So I think with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Eileen. Thanks. You're muted, Eileen.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark. This is a nice chance to, in our community call here, in our community online virtual team, to introduce the charrette process in a little more detail. We're going to get an introduction to what a charrette is and what we're thinking of doing in our charrette, what we're planning on doing in our charrette from Greg Walker, who is a subject matter expert on the process and our great fearless team member from several years here, from the beginning actually, so with Mark. So, but at first, I'd like Timothy Damon and Danae Espinoza to they will introduce some of the highlights of the ACE activities underway around the world. One of the opportunities of going through an organizational development design process like a charrette at this moment in history in 2021, next spring, is that we get to take stock of what's working, what's not working, what are some of the immediate and pressing challenges for this decade of action to really try and drive through carbon drawdown, and the role that ACE plays in our work. What is it, who's doing what, how can we help to build a framework and reorganize ourselves in such a way that we're really bringing the best that we can to the evolving ACE community, global community of organizations. So with no further ado, Tim and Danae, would you like to go ahead and introduce the highlights for ACE work as we see it?
So yeah, Tim, you are the one who will be starting.
Very good. Hello, everyone. Timothy Damon from United States and Ohio. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, Eileen and Mark as well, and Greg for convening. So there's a lot that we could talk about. And so to keep very much focused and on point, I would say that this is a key moment both for ACE and for ECOS. And so the timing of this organizational design and re-envisioning process is very relevant. And what we see is that just as the ACE program has been struggling to evolve and facing gaps and challenges, but people have been pushing to move it forward in spite of that, we've seen that ECOS has started out and been building up, and lots of volunteers putting in efforts, and now it's to the point where we really have a lot of momentum, but we need more clarity on where to take it and how will ECOS most benefit the overall landscape of implementing ACE. And so that internal goal of our charrette process, and Eileen and Greg will get into the timelines but in detail, but this would be done ideally before we would get to possibly having SB 52 happening next year, and hopefully then COP26 in November. And that will put us in a position to be able to continue the leveraging and advocacy that we've already been doing as ECOS You may have seen or participated in the submission process that we had back at the beginning of the year in January and February, and that produced our very substantive submissions for informing the design of a new work program on ACE. And that's the piece of this that parties have to do, is that the Doha work program that's been guiding us since 2012 is now ending, was supposed to be reviewed this year. Obviously, that was delayed. But by COP26, parties also need to have envisioned what will the next 5 to 10 years of implementing all of this climate education, empowerment, and outreach look like. And so we want to make sure ECOS can continue to bolster that process. But at the same time, ECOS has been doing a lot to try to implement ACE. And so we also want to be in a strong position to do that. And Denai will be speaking in a moment more about some of the non-UNFCCC wonky kind of stuff that ECOS has been doing. But I really see this as a critical timing, a good synergy for us. And if we can come out of this charrette process in a very strong place, then we're going to be able to capitalize on all these opportunities, because already work needs to be hitting the ground and getting going. As I said, there's a lot more we could go into. If there are questions, if people need some further background on what ACE is, then I'm happy to answer any of that. But otherwise, I leave it to your guidance in terms of what more would be useful. Thank you.
And Danae, were you going to speak as well?
Yes. Well, as you know, other the challenges is that the ACE program is a program that, well, that has been mostly focused on education. So, however, the program goes beyond the educational area, you know. In ACE, we have 6 elements. So the 6 elements of ACE require an holistic understanding as they all complement each other. So education cannot be alone without public participation or access to information or international cooperation, etc. You know, ACE is an holistic methodology. So I would like to also emphasize that the balance of the program has shifted more towards young people, and in some way the people left them, the youth, with the responsibility of continuing to push the program when this is a plural issue involving other groups in society. The youth is not like the hero of the ACE program, you know. It's a, yes, of course, it's an important group. It's a vulnerable group on climate change negotiations and the climate change arena. But the responsibility to implement ACE and to cover other, to face the challenges of climate change is, well, globally, you know. So ACE is a truly active participation of several actors. ACE needs several actors to be implemented. As an example of this multi-stakeholder participatory process, one of the examples is the Learn for Climate campaign, which is a multi-partner campaign coordinated by ECOS that aims to bridge a fundamental gulf between the aim of the landmark Paris Agreement and the realities of the current climate response level on the ground faced by communities across the globe. So together we are calling for raised ambition and insist that nations follow through a transformational climate empowerment agenda. I thought transformation is needed as well for the implementation of ACE. So in this campaign, the people have the right to know, the right to act, and the ability to influence climate decision making. Another example, independent example, is the NDC We Want project, and its first chapter in Latin America and the Caribbean, which seeks to both strengthen institutional support for implementing action for climate empowerment and facilitate regional convenings. So this dialogue and co-creation between the governmental process and civil society and other actors are so crucial for the implementation of ACE. Unfortunately, in Latin America, we have a laboratory, the region is a laboratory, climate laboratory to do that. So NDC we want also is to share best practices, etc., through regional cooperation, because every region has their own way to do the things. And the way to do the things, of course, impact the ACE implementation. Something that I would like to mention is that the importance for ACE, for example, in the United States is not the same in Mexico, my country, for example, or the needs of ACE are not the same in, I don't know, China, for example, or Taiwan. So that's the holistic part of ACE, and it's very interesting to see it. So on the issue of opportunities, ECOS has a great area of opportunity to generate the space for dialogue and co-creation with different actors in ACE at the international level. What is a reality is that ACE is still unknown. It is not known how it is being implemented, or if it is being implemented. It is not known who is the responsible for the implementation. The people who are involved in the climate negotiations and the UNFCCC process are other areas like the CBD, the Convention of Biodiversity. They know who are the responsible of it, but in territory is not the same. So we need to share this information with other actors, because it's just on the ground of the climate change negotiations, but in territory the things changes. So that is why ECOS can count on provide the space and tools for understanding the program. So given that ACE is a methodology for the correct implementation of the Paris Agreement, well, that is why ECOS has been thinking about how to build this collaborative process through the charrette that Aileen and Greg will be talking in the next minutes. That's all.
Thank you, Danae and Tim. So we can see that, you know, along with, we all know in our climate work that there are huge challenges facing the global climate community and the ACE community, as we've described, the Action for Climate Empowerment community, of which ECOS plays a role. And as we go through our reorganization, we're trying to understand what are the challenges, how can we improve and support this global ACE community to our best effort. And with that, I'm just going to ask Greg Walker, if you could please introduce the idea and the technique and the process that we're going to use for our charrette. Thank you. And introduce yourself.
Thank you, Eileen. And thank you to everyone who's on this community call. And thank you to my Mediators Beyond Borders International colleagues. I see a number of you have joined. Really appreciate that. I think this is going to be a terrific project, and it's because of the investment that all of you are willing to make in it. I'm Greg Walker. I'm a professor of communication and a few other things at Oregon State University in Corvallis, Oregon, on the left coast of the U.S., and have been involved in this kind of work for almost 30 years. And so way too many stories to tell. I won't bore you with them now. But have been involved with ECOS as well for a number of years, and we're all excited about this process. We think it's, as both Tim and Danae have mentioned, very timely. So what I want to do is just share an explanation of what we're going to try to do. And of course, make sure that your comments, questions are addressed. So I have a handful of slides, and let me pull those up. I see if I can do the shared screen. And it said I need to have access to the shared screen. I think, Mark, that's going to come from you, so that I can pull these slides.
You should have it. You should have it now. Okay,
thanks. Yeah, let me pull up these slides, and you can tell me if they're coming through on your screen. I always ask my students, a thumbs up, you can see these, I hope? All right, that's all I needed. So just a few slides. Some of you are familiar with the charrette process. You've probably participated in charrettes. The charrette process has been around a long time. It's evolved. It doesn't come in a one-size-fits-all. Typically, the best charrette processes are designed for the specific project, and that's what we're doing. So we're obviously taking our knowledge and experience about charrettes, but we're tailoring this design to us, to ECOS, to the ECOS community, to ECOS as an evolving organization. The points here, I think, are perhaps new to some of you, but I'm guessing not to many of you. We know that communities and organizations need to take stock of themselves. That's something that Eileen referred to, and certainly Mark and Danae and Tim can attest to this. So people use charrettes for stock taking, advising, planning. It really has been heavily used in planning, community planning, and organizational development for a number of years. And what happens in a charrette process is that the participants consider ideas and alternatives through critical thinking and constructive collaborative interaction. And they typically occur in multiple sessions, or in the case of our proposed design, a series of phases. So let me explain those phases. I'll go through this material with ample time for us to discuss what's ahead. So the charrette process right now is guided by a charrette committee. And the charrette committee consists of a number of people who are members of the core team of ECOS. And if you have questions about that, we certainly can answer that. And what we've put together is a 4-phase process that you can see consists of inclusive dialogues, regional, global charrettes, and then a design report and review. So let me explain each of these briefly. The first phase is dialogue, and we're scheduled 2 inclusive dialogues to try to accommodate different time zones and certainly different regional interests and regional participation. They're both going to occur on the 13th of January, given the time zones, and one is really an Asia Pacific regional dialogue or inclusive dialogue, and the other one is accommodating time zones in Africa, the Americas, and Europe. The dialogues are tentatively scheduled for about 2 hours in length, and they're going to feature semi-structured conversations about the nature of ECOS as an organization and community going forward. And what the dialogue process that I have used, we typically employ a cafe-type design. So if you've ever been part of a World Cafe activity, it's similar to that in the sense that we provide guiding questions. So we'll begin the dialogues with some opening comments about ECOS, where we've been and where we're likely going in the future, and not prescriptive in any way. The dialogues are very open conversations. The way that I tell people about dialogues, in a dialogue for me, all ideas are good ideas. All ideas deserve consideration and respect. But there are guiding questions that we as a charrette committee will provide as ways to focus our conversations. And then the dialogues provide a foundation for the charrettes. So we'll take the ideas that come out of the dialogues and incorporate those or use those to certainly influence our ultimate design ideas for the regional charrettes. While we have a preliminary design for the regional charrettes, we won't finalize that design until we see what emerges from the dialogue. So that's the first part. And that occurs, as you can see, on the 13th of January. Just about a month from now. The charrette process itself, or the charrettes, occur in 2 parts. So phase 2 we refer to as the regional design charrettes, and we've scheduled 3 of them. And I'm the only person perhaps crazy enough to be part of all of these. I've asked my colleagues, for those of you who don't know anything about Mediators Beyond Borders International, we are an international conflict management and peace building organization that's been around for a little over a decade. We have a climate change team, and these are people who go to the climate change meetings, give talks about climate change. Some of my colleagues have gone through the climate reality leadership training, if you're familiar with that. But we are a group of people who are mediators and facilitators. We're process people. And I've invited my colleagues, we have over 50 people on the climate change team, and I've invited my colleagues on the team to join me as a facilitation team for guiding these charrettes. And a number of my friends and colleagues are on the call today. And what will happen then is that I will ask my MBBI colleagues to look at their calendars and when they're at their best, if they're morning people or night people. But I don't expect any of them or any of you to participate in these 3 charrettes. They're all designed the same way. So what we do in the Africa, West and Central Asia charrette, the Americas and Europe charrette, the East Asia and Pacific charrette, the design of the charrettes will be identical. Obviously, they'll be different depending upon who participates. You are welcome to participate in all of them if you want to, but I think I'm probably the only person I intend to be at every one of them, but I don't expect anybody else to be there. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to, again, respect regional differences and time zones and try to be as inclusive as we can in this way. Now, the regional charrettes focus on organizational design ideas and proposals. And if you've ever been involved in a charrette participants evaluate options. So if we're looking at a landscape, if a landscape architect decides to hold a charrette for a community to deal with the landscape issues surrounding the development of a public park, there'll be alternatives presented, and then the participants evaluate those alternatives. We'll do something similar in the sense that we will invite people to propose how ECOS should be organized, how it should function as an organization, how it should be structured as an organization. And these might be in the form of just general ideas. Well, I only have ideas about leadership, or I only have ideas about decision making. Other people may give us well-developed proposals that cover conceivably just about every aspect of a healthy functioning organization. We don't know what people will present. We'll ask people to develop these ideas ahead of time. But what happens at the regional charrettes is that this is where we move from a dialogue phase to a more deliberative phase, in the sense that we need to be able to evaluate alternatives. And a good example of that, that in some organizations I've been a part of, has to do with the simple issue of administration. Do you propose that an organization be administered through an executive director and an executive committee? Should a global organization like ECOS have a shared secretariat where you have a shared administration, for example, with someone from the global south and someone from the global north? A lot of issues like that can be addressed, and people may have ideas, they propose them. And what we wind up doing in a charrette process is we work in groups, and as big group and small group, and people develop criteria for evaluating design options, and then they apply those criteria. And what those criteria are, that's going to be up to the participants. And then the design work from the regional charrettes is considered at the global charrette. So what emerges from the regional charrettes then become a big part of what we do at the global charrette. So you can see now we've got dialogues in January, regional charrettes in February, and then part 3 is a global charrette. And this is a difficult one because on the one hand, we want to honor, respect, accommodate regional differences. But on the other hand, there comes a point where you just try to bring everybody together, and there's no ideal time for doing it. And so we're doing our best to come up with times that are relatively civil for all parties concerned. On the other hand, I gave a talk recently at a conference in Jakarta, Indonesia, and I was up at 3:30 in the morning to do it. And some of us, and I'm one of them, will be willing to get up at 3:30 in the morning or 4 in the morning, but that's going to be a challenge for us. And of course, we'll look to all of you to provide us with your concerns about this. But the idea behind a global charrette is that we focus on design ideas and proposals that the regional charrettes have sent forward. We don't exclude necessarily new ideas, but our primary focus is to build on the work that comes out of the regional charrettes Once again, we apply evaluative criteria to assess design alternatives. And once again, this is deliberative, which means we need to be able to test ideas. We need to be able to find points of agreement, but also disagree constructively and respectfully. And so, again, I use the example, shared secretariat compared to an executive director, subcommittees versus working groups. All of these different organizational features that we think are important. I'm currently working with some community-based collaborative groups in the United States who are trying to deal with the relationship between membership and a steering committee or an executive committee. And they're struggling with that. They want to be as inclusive as possible. They want to welcome as many members as possible, but they also know that they need a small group of people to guide this community-based collaborative. Well, those are issues that organizations deal with on a regular basis, and we want to, again, welcome ideas based upon everybody's experience, what makes for a good organization. And that, of course, goes back to comments that both Tim and Danae have shared about where ECOS has been and what is the relationship between ECOS and other organizations, relationship between ECOS and the UNFCCC. Those are issues that we can discuss. So the last part, phase 4, there's an ECOS design report and review, and this is where the Charrette committee will review and synthesize the work of each Charrette process phase, and particularly what comes out of the global Charrette, and then prepares a draft ECOS design report. It's shared with all interested parties for review and comment, and then a final report is shared for adoption consideration, and that will occur after the March global Charrette. Now, the charrettes that we are putting together, the dialogues in charrettes, are designed to be, to the greatest extent possible, participatory, collaborative, deliberative, transparent, inclusive, and accessible. And if we do that well, we discover what I call an emergent consensus. We really don't know where consensus will emerge, and when it doesn't emerge, how do we address that? And that's a conversation that we've been having among the Charrette committee and the ECOS core team, and it's one that we welcome your ideas about that, your experiences with that. I should share that, again, working with these collaborative processes and groups as I have for almost 30 years, an issue that comes up again and again is the issue of consensus decision making. And those of us who've been going to the UNFCCC meetings for a number of years, we know about the challenges of consensus for all the parties, all the delegations that participate in the climate change negotiations. So those are my comments. I'm going to stop now. I'm going to ask my colleagues on the Charrette committee to add anything, and then of course we've got a number of comments in the chat, and so open it up for conversation about this effort, and of course, again, welcoming comments too from my MBB colleagues who are on the call.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg. And before we open up to questions, I wanted to throw the mic back to Tim, if you could please add a comment that you had hoped to add earlier. So, thank you.
Yes, thank you. I left out earlier to mention that there are some very specific parallels between where the ACE process is going and where ECOS is going. You know, as Mark mentioned in the chat, so far ECOS has been entirely volunteer driven, hasn't had funding. Well, ACE work in general is underfunded, and parties keep recognizing that finance gap. And so a new part of the work program has to be how to fix that. And in the same way, I imagine ECOS is going to need to figure out through our process, you know, whether we're going to go with a model that has a funded secretariat or executive committee. Are we going to be able to have a model that operates without that? In general, in the process, there's a lack of metrics and reporting. Well, internally for ECOS, we should have more of a guidance on what it is that we're going to do, what is our impact? How are we quantifying that impact? Where are the opportunities to make an impact? And as well, you know, this whole process should be putting us in that stronger place to be able to move forward and capitalize on all of that. So just to emphasize, there were a few very specific linkages that should come out in the kinds of proposals that we're having. And this really is critical so that we have the clarity as we keep growing ECOS. And that's why we really need all of you to come in on this with us, is that we have this very special opportunity in relationship with the UNFCCC process by having that status that Mark mentioned of being formally recognized, not as a constituency, but as a community. And that's given us access to be able to influence and to build strong networking relationships with ACE national focal points and other people. So we have something very special here, but we need to kick it up to the next level by having more clarity and structure. And the more that all of you can be part of that, the more successful it's going to be, the more it will meet all of our hopes and dreams and expectations. So thank you. That was my last little pitch there.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks. So I see a hand raised. Cedric?
Yes, thanks for all the explanations. Can you be more specific about the achievements that ECOS has already done? I mean, did you, can you give examples of achievements that you've done so far?
Mark, do you want to speak to that?
Well, sure. So just as quick background, you know, the original Framework Convention on Climate Change back in 1992 called for countries to develop education training, public engagement programs with the idea that the public was going to get involved with developing solutions to climate change. And that really did not happen. In the Paris Agreement in 2015, there was a renewed attempt to try to re-emphasize the importance of education. And also that same year, they changed Article 6 of the convention, which is the education, training, and public awareness piece of the convention that, by the way, all the countries of the world agreed to. They changed the name to ACE. So I realize some of you who are new to this world of UN acronyms might not know what ACE means, but it stands for Action for Climate Empowerment, which is shorthand for Article 6 of the convention. And so in 2016, when ECOS got started, our main achievements were that we started to provide a forum outside of the formal UN process for folks to get together. We were certainly inspired by Youngo and some of these other constituencies, but technically speaking, we are not a constituency. And we're brand new. So Youngo and Ringo, that's like Greg's been involved with Ringo for many years. Those have been around for many, many years. And ECOS is brand new. So over the past couple of years, our main contributions have been within the UN system in terms of hosting meetings at COPs, at these subsidiary body meetings in June in Bonn, Germany. We had big plans this year to be in Bonn past June, and also in Glasgow about now, or last month. And of course that didn't happen. But you know, we have still been doing our best to serve as sort of a networker and clearinghouse for ideas, information. You know, for the past year, we've been having regular weekly calls, these ECOS community calls that are generally recorded, and you know, Climate Collage gave one some time ago, and you know, that's been just one of the things that we've been able to accomplish. A lot of what we've done is behind the scenes, and you know, we do work with focal points, with folks at the Secretariat office. A lot of it's just geared for capacity building, but we've had our own constraints because we're all volunteers, and there's only so much you can do on volunteer power alone. You know, we had hoped to be fundraising this past year, and for obvious reasons, that's been more difficult than we anticipated. So I think we're at the stage where we have a good, solid foundation. we have made recommendations sort of as a think tank, bringing ideas and expertise together to make recommendations to the Secretariat about this new work program, like Tim was describing, and the Learn for Climate initiative, the work on the NDCs we want, NDCs standing for Nationally Determined Contributions. Again, for those of you not familiar with the UN lingo. And so our goal has been developing our own capacity while we're also helping others to develop theirs. And that's kind of like building an airplane while it's in flight, or maybe an airship is more appropriate these days. But in any event, I think you get the gist of what I'm trying to say. We have enormous potential. We have contacts all over the world. We're developing a database. We have about, I think, 6 or 8 fellows now who are developing a database of climate and sustainability organizations all over the world that we may be able to bring into this charrette process. And in any event, it'll help us as we're playing sort of the matchmaker to link people up at all kinds of different scales, from the international on down to the very local scale. So hopefully that answers your question, Cedric.
Yes, thanks.
Are there any specific questions about the charrette process as well, or
Yeah.
we can continue on the ECOS? Yes.
Yes,
Yes, Cedric.
just a point of clarification. The charrette process is a process of, it's a design process. What is it? So it's done to design what kind of thing? Well, what is the output of this design? What do we design? Do we design ways of teachings, content? What is it exactly?
That's an excellent question. In this case, we're really thinking about the nature of ECOS as an organization, and that's anything that people think are relevant. So we start with the notion of structure. For example, how do we structure the organization? Is it led by a steering committee, an executive committee? How are those people selected? Do they just simply volunteer? And of course, you can get into issues of what are the priorities of ECOS, and we know that it's education, communication, and outreach. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of what we do? For example, organizations will begin and decide, well, who we are, what's our identity, and what's our purpose. The charrette process, beginning with dialogues, in effect, at least initially, every idea is a good idea. Everything is on the table. Now, so if a person wanted to say, well, we need to know what our purpose is, or we need to know what our relationship is to other organizations, or we need to know who can become a member. We as a charrette committee don't want to determine what the important issues are. We'll have some prompts that'll reflect some concerns we have and topics we hope people discuss. But whatever people want to bring to the process, the goal is to strengthen ECOS as an organization and as a community. I mean, and those terms are, to me, cousin concepts, but not the same. And we want to be very inclusive about the ideas that you think matter. And that's what we've been kind of dealing with. Who are we as an organization? And as Mark said, it started out back in, I guess, Marrakesh 4 years ago, with the idea that perhaps it would become a 10th constituency, similar to the environmental NGO constituency or the research and independent NGO constituency. But it's evolved into a community with the Secretariat and parties recognizing us, but who we are going forward, that's a big part of what this is, and how we function as an organization. So I don't know if that answers your question, but basically whatever ideas the participants bring to the process are going to be important for people to consider. And I'll ask other members of our Charrette committee to add their views on what we're trying to accomplish through this. I know we've had good discussions among ourselves about that.
Yeah, I wanted to also reflect on a very practical matter that Tim has raised that we want to have as an outcome of the Charrette process, which is really simply functional. How does ECOS adopt its formal positions on matters and advocacy related to UNFCCC, for example, by consensus, by majority voting? What does it mean to be a stakeholder community in such a global enterprise as UNFCCC? And, has the world changed that radically that, we really need to be focusing on our other reporting and measuring responsibilities as well to other organizations, not just UNFCCC. I mean, these are the types of things that we've been facing this year. And as we build and strengthen our own framework and structure, we want to make sure that we're continuing to understand the ecosystem that we operate in order to make sure that the design choices that we make are actually reflecting our best understanding of the actual context within which we're operating, which has really deeply shifted in the last certainly 10 years, 12 months, 6 months, and this is the decade of action. So if we can do this well and carefully with reflection and collaboration, we might be able to, really optimize appropriately to be an actual presence and function smoothly. Isatis, would you like to also speak and speak to your answer there? Are you able to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it has been said, but I just wanted to reiterate some of the points and expand on some of the points that Mark was saying. So I think that, as we all know, of those that work in AIDS, there's been like fragmentation in a lot of, both in what the governments are doing, but also how the organizations that work under the UNFCCC or in parallel to the UNFCCC see each other. So what ECOS brings to the table is a platform community where we can meet, where we can come together and develop new strategies that are either part of ECOS or parallel to ECOS. So I think like we have, that is a very important success that ECOS has been able to grow and be and have presence globally, and that now that we have achieved that, we have received prominence to be a key actor in all the UNFCCC spaces that pertain AIDS. So we have been part of the the regional climate dialogues around AIDS, and we're able to influence the Doha Work Program and submit the new recommendations for the new AIDS Work Program. So I think like those are very specific conversation, and since we've been doing so much, it's hard to hone them down, but I think those are like very concrete examples. And the charrette is to how do we build together, like how, as we are expanding, right? Because before it was a smaller group, and now that we've been fortunate enough to grow into this like global space, is like how do we make decision making, how do we effectively support the work, like how can ECOS do that more effectively? And that's why we're having this charrette process.
Thank you, Isatis. Yeah. Just to riff on that too, we've grown, and also the world has changed. So global climate movements have changed radically in the last 18 months. So, we have to respond to that change if we want to actually be as effective as possible in capacity building, to acknowledge the new capacity that is present, and to try and understand what, if any, way we can collaborate with these new climate movements that are not nation-based as well. I mean, that's another issue that's come up this last year for us. Yes, Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much for this presentation and your introductions. It's really interesting. I was wondering right now, since ECOS is a community of climate education players and actors, and it's a very diverse community. I was wondering, who are the actors who are the most engaged right now within this community?
Mark?
Well, some of them are on this call today, and actually one of them, I see her hand is raised. Laura, would you like to introduce yourself and maybe help, maybe you, I'm sure you have a comment, but maybe you could also help answer Michael's question?
Sure, yeah. I would say in terms of the people who've been most engaged, there's probably about 25 of us who have been most engaged in terms of the core team of just like the organizing and being on a lot of the organizing calls. But in terms of the ACE dialogues that just happened through throughout the starting in June, we've really been reaching out in each region of the world through our different networks and contacts and everything. And so because we've been working with the UNFCCC to select a speaker for each region. And so then what we were doing was having a speaker that would be selected from each region, and then we would also host a community call specifically as a debrief after each regional. So then they would be putting it out through their networks, and we'd have a community call based on to debrief what was happening in that regional dialogue. So, and I guess maybe I'll put the rest of the answer sort of together with some of the follow-up to like who we are and what we're doing. I think in some ways, for me, it's been really amazing because I was new to the COP process and the SBs and just the whole UNFCCC process. And what I found in ECOS is an amazing community that has such an incredible amount of collective wisdom and experience and understanding through, some people who have spent years in Youngo, some people who, have, Ringo and all these, some people are in other constituencies. And then some people have been deeply following ACE. And then some people really are new to the UNFCCC, but are working deeply in ACE areas and in organizations that, really relate to ACE. And so for me, it's been a place to really make sense of what's happening, and a place where anybody, no matter who you are across the world, can come and learn like how you can actually engage with all of this. And so I think the submission process was really important because we were able to provide a clear space that was open to anyone to participate in, in shaping what would come next. And then we also were able to provide a template for how you could also do that within your own organization. So we created a shared submission as ECOS, and then we created a way for other organizations to not have to do all of that groundwork, but to be able to just take what we'd created together and then make it their own. And we really found through that process that there's going to be lots of other ways that we could do that going forward. We now have a seat at the table in terms of being able to give our input to certain things. We were invited to the informal consultation, which was great for the Doha Work Program. So there's lots of different ways that I think that moving forward, I mean, this has been very ad hoc, how we've come together and what we've been doing. I think a lot of the other things, because it hasn't been entirely clear, it's been evolving in terms of our structure. A lot of us have sort of found each other and are starting to collaborate on things that, they're connected to ECOS, but we're starting to put them sort of outside of ECOS just because we didn't have a specific structure or fundraising process yet. So that's partially why it's so important that we come together now and define, who are we and what do we want to be, and do we just keep everything, do we just connect and find each other through ECOS, but then, keep our projects outside of it, or what projects really should be under ECOS, or, there's lots of questions around that. But, I think there's tons of potential, and then the Learn for Climate campaign is really starting to be much more thought about now in terms of having a year to plan towards COP26 and how we can really, I think we have over 50 organizations that are already interested now. We were just looking at it, and I'm sure that's going to grow as we head towards COP26.
Thank you so much, Laura. That was very, very insightful.
Thanks for that, Laura. And I think the key, primary 25 participants, those of us who are on this community call right now from ECOS, I'm just looking around at the list. Miro, if you're able to speak, that would be nice to hear your voice as well. You have an interesting perspective because this last year, Austria had a very significant transition to an important climate restructuring within the Austrian government, I should say. You can describe that a little bit better if you're able to speak. I'm not sure you are. Maybe not. Okay. Oh yes, Gabor. Yes.
So that's a very interesting meeting for me to join and discover ECOS through. And I wanted to know if you had any idea of how many people will be joining the different Charrette meetings that you will be organizing, if you can already foresee that based on the regions where they're coming from, there'll be gaps that will have to be breached in order for the organization to structure itself. So yeah, those are the two questions that came to me now.
Well, I'll answer it this way. We don't know. I want to hitchhike on something that Laura has shared with us. We really rely on all of us to get the word out. We have developed an event announcement and registration form. There's no cost to participating in this, but we do want people to register ahead of time. Gabor, it's an excellent question. We don't know how many people will participate. We hope we get significant participation, including perhaps some people new to ECOS who have been working in these fields of climate crisis communication, education, stakeholder engagement. But it's really going to be up to all of us to try to get the word out through as many networks as possible. And now, will that influence the design? Well, we'll make sure that the design is appropriate, whether we have 15 people or 150 people. And of course, I didn't mention this in my comments, but this will all be done on Zoom. And we've all probably had our share of Microsoft Teams and Zoom and other platforms, but obviously we're going to be doing all of this online, and we'll do that to the best of our ability.
Yeah, Mark?
I do think there's an opportunity to reach out beyond the usual suspects who have already been involved with the UN climate education, learning, etc. process. And if we're successful, we also have to be very mindful that when we use terms like ACE and NDCs and so forth, and even UNFCCC, there's people that are going to go, what are you talking about? And there's also people, I was on a webinar recently that involved a lot of different climate related organizations, but they had a lot of doubt and skepticism about the UN climate process. And in a way, it's a missed opportunity. I think ECOS can serve as a bridge. In fact, one of the people at the Secretariat said, ECOS can serve as a bridge to civil society, meaning everybody that's not in government. And we can also serve as a bridge to government too. That's kind of our unique position. But if we're successful, we'll be able to kind of find a way to really engage with a very wide, diverse audience, including folks that don't know a lot about the UN process, but might be intrigued. And, it's also been, until recently, it's been a process that's been left up to the experts. Let the negotiators, the scientists figure this out, and hopefully they'll save the day. But the original vision of the convention back in 1992, in this Article 6, where it talked about having the public participating in developing responses to climate change, they weren't going to leave it up to the experts. Experts are important, but we can see what the result is if we just leave it in the hand of the VIPs and the experts. you know, the public absolutely has to be involved. And so I think that ECOS is a potential bridge to be able to reach, you know, so many more people and really empower them around, you know, how they can develop resilient solutions in their own communities, in their own households, in their own countries. I guess that would be my goal. And but how we do that will be tricky, because we need to be able to appeal to people who are already immersed in the process and already know the nuances and subtleties of the UN process. And ideally, we need to be able to be accessible to people who, you know, if we start throwing acronyms around and they're going to feel lost in the first 2 minutes, and they'll sign off and we'll have lost them. So I think that's one of the delicate dances that we'll have to be able to try to navigate.
Thanks, Mark, for that. And Laura, I think you have your hand up again. Yes, I think you took it down. Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I think maybe one thing I would just add in terms of numbers is that for organizational development, you know, I think we want to get this out there to, you know, whoever would really be interested and want to participate, we want them to be able to participate. But I'm not so concerned with numbers as long as we have people from all over the world that are participating. So we're getting different input across different perspectives. Because for me, it just feels like, you know, we have incredible people across this network who have so much capacity and are doing so many things already. And it feels a little bit like we're just on hold because we need to formalize the structure of how we're working together. And so to me, as long as we can, you know, have, you know, perspectives in across everywhere, you know, we just need to define this. And to me, I really think the real work is once we've actually clarified all of this, then there's going to be so many ways for other people to participate that maybe wouldn't, you know, be as interested in the actual, you know, structure of things, but might actually really want to participate in all the different ways that we can, just as ECOS together outside of that. So I think it's both. I think it's, you know, let's get this out there to anybody that would really want to participate with us, but, you know, it's really about just moving forward more than anything else.
Thank you, Laura. Absolutely. Moving forward, looking forward to the inclusive dialogue starting in January. So Greg, would you like to help us wrap up here? Is that the hour?
Yeah, just one quick thing. We have an event announcement, a registration form. How do we get that out to people? So is that ready to go, where we can share that with folks here and they can get this stuff out to their networks? And yeah. I'll add one comment. You know, I've been doing this kind of work for a long time. I learned a long time ago that to place a higher priority on the quality of participation than the quantity of participants. So to echo Laura's comment, we don't know how many people are going to be there. We welcome everybody, but obviously it's important that people engage in meaningful work and think it's a good investment of their time and produce some important results. But Eileen, what are our thoughts on that in terms of the event announcement and the registration material form?
I have a link here, which is a view link to the event announcements with the embedded registration form. Are we happy as a group of something like 24 of us here to take that link and share? Or you could put it into, you know, it's a Google Doc, the view only, and you can, you know, print it out as a PDF and share, or share the link. What would we like? What do you think, Mark?
Well, also, I mean, I've got the link to where we have it on the website also.
Okay, yeah, why don't you do that? Yeah, if you post the website link, that's probably the most straightforward. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, to be clear, can I take the link and send it in my network? There's this network of climate change activists in Switzerland. Yeah. Can I just go ahead and send it?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
And is everybody on the ECOS mailing list? Because I think that, Mark, I assume that's where you're going to send out the PDF and other materials that people may need to be able to give to other people if they want to do anything beyond the website.
Right, I'll put a link in to the chat window also on how people can sign up for the discussion list if they're not already.
Yeah, because we'll get your email from the registration form, and then you'll become part of the ECOS mailing list. Yeah, community list. Yeah, thank you. So the website's the most straightforward place to go. Mark just posted that link. Thank you so much for joining us today and for volunteering. Many of you are part of the of Greg's group, Mediators Beyond Borders, and I really appreciate your volunteering and stepping in as process experts to help with the facilitation of this. We can't do it without you, and we wouldn't have even been able to talk about a broader, deeper charrette process while we do our reframing and transformation as an organization without Greg and your support as facilitators. So we are deeply indebted to you. So thank you so much for stepping in and stepping up like this. It makes a big difference, and we hope to make you proud through our process here. You know, participate with our best hearts. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Greg, yeah, thank you, everybody.